Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I'm talking to the wonderful Millie Mulcahey. We're talking about taking time off over the holidays and particularly the festive season. And Millie shares with us 5 mistakes that she's made and top tips for how not to make them yourself. So I do hope you enjoy this episode and wish you a very happy and restful festive season. Hello, Millie.
Hi, Emma.
Thank you so much for being here to talk about a topic which is close to my heart. Close to my, because we're going to talk about Christmas and the Christmas holidays. Close to my heart because I am a Christmasaholic. I just need to get that right out there straight away. Also because I know that people really struggle. And when I say people, I mean PhD researchers really struggle around holiday time and particularly around Christmas holidays. I am really looking forward to you talking to us about that because you've got 5 mistakes. I can't wait.
From which I have learned.
Awesome. But first of all, before we get into that, I always ask people to tell us a little bit about their own journey. So can you tell us a little bit about you?
Absolutely. So I've got 2 versions of this story, both equally true. The first is the kind of what you'd send for your conference bio, and I want to tell that one because that's what people read and then they start to spiral about, and then I'll tell you what was actually happening. So I went to the London School of Economics and I studied social anthropology, and I'm passionate about anthropology and the way that it makes you start to think about the world around you and be more analytical about your relationships and the way that you relate to the society that you're in and when you travel. And I think that's amazing. And I sort of, while I was there, I started working in a museum in the US, and I worked on a site with Native American historical interpreters, so sort of public historians from the Wampanoag, Cherokee and Shinnecock nations. And we were telling the story of the English colonization of America, the Mayflower arrival. And I really loved that job. I loved being a guide. I loved telling the story. But what I started to notice was just the emotional burden that Native American people were taking on by interpreting their own unresolved history, and also how brutal the questioning could be, explicitly racist or very I didn't realize there were any Native people, or are you sure you're real Native? And all this was happening.
Blimey.
And it became something I was really interested in, how museums, however well-meaning, might not realize that this was taking place and might not realize this kind of added burden and complexity. So that was kind of in the back of my head. And then despite loving that work, for some reason, I decided I had to do the kind of graduate scheme route. And I went into London and I worked at a recruitment firm. And it was to support students from marginalized communities into top work, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it, but the work itself wasn't really where I wanted to be. And I've continued some of that with copywriting and marketing, but I still was missing that kind of academic research element. So I quit. I spent every penny I had made in a completely crazy move and went to New Zealand, the Cook Islands and Australia. And the whole time I was there, I just was talking to people. I'd like go to a museum and just chat to the staff for hours about what they were doing and why they were doing it and the challenges of doing it. And it became really clear to me that I wanted to go back into academia. I wrote my master's application on the plane. Did a research master's at Durham, which is 40,000 words in a year. And I still can't quite fathom why it's that many, but wrote that, and then the first Indigenous research centre in the UK opened up at Kent University by Professor David Stirrup, and that was absolutely where I needed and wanted to be. So I started at Kent, and I'm now doing my PhD. So it feels like a very linear move because the marketing experience in London really helped me to kind of forge my sense of self and my profile, and allowed me to work alongside my PhD, which made that feasible.
Right.
So that's the classic. That's the classic straight line. Oh, I always knew what I wanted to do.
Love that. We love that.
Yeah. And then what was actually happening was I was a very high performing but unbelievably stressed student. And my whole memory of school was like carrying this back-breakingly heavy bag with every lessons book in it, and then coming home and doing extra lessons with tutors and then hours of work. And my parents actually implemented, instead of a bedtime, they implemented like a TV time to force me to stop working in the evenings.
Wow.
And a huge part of that was because I'm dyslexic, and I was diagnosed as dyslexic when I was like 14. And it was just, I just had to work 3 times as hard to do the same thing. But I was incredibly lucky, actually, because my mom was dyslexic, but at a time when that was not recognized. And so she brought both me and my brother up, saying like, this is a hurdle now, but it's actually your superpower. And if anyone calls you, and if anyone calls you stupid or lazy, which teachers absolutely did, they're just illustrating their own ignorance. And that couldn't be
for your mum.
Yeah, and it couldn't be more true. And I think it's such a shame that many neurodivergent students haven't had that said to them. And that is so important. Like, it's their ignorance. It's very much a them problem, not a you problem. And you should feel a little bit sorry for them and then move on. Prove them wrong. But I took that really kind of lack of work-life balance and that attitude that I had to work 100 times harder, which I think was true when I had exams, because I struggled, but I didn't think was actually true at university. And I think it was very much to my detriment. And I took, for the first 6 weeks at the LSE, I read every book and every article on the reading list.
Oh, bless you.
No one does that.
Bless you.
I didn't know that anyone did that.
But the thing is, some people do, don't they? And you're one of them. Exactly. Some people do. And I, from teaching undergraduates, I know that. And oh wow, my heart goes out to you with that.
Well, and it's just entirely unsustainable.
Exactly
and
that.
I only started really performing once I'd stopped that. And what stopped that, sadly, was I took a half day off on Christmas Day. That was the only break I'd taken. And I had my first panic attack, and I genuinely thought I was dying. And then I started having 3 panic attacks a day, for like a couple of months, and thankfully had this amazing support network, and a support network that I trusted would help me to do well, so that I could take a step back. Do you know, like, I trusted that they were telling me I needed to break, and that was true, and that needed to happen. And my body had kind of, I mean, bless it, like, at least through school I was being forced to exercise and eat well, but at uni I was putting under the same stress with none of the like support.
Right.
And it's entirely unsustainable. So I've then become, since then, for my own health, really passionate about having a work-life balance, about the work towards cultivating that, and those techniques to kind of create that balance and that mental well-being. And I know how valuable that is, because by 3rd year I did so much better in 3rd year, and I was taking loads of time off, and I was like seeing my friends regularly. So it does pay off. Like, it definitely pays off in grades. Having that structure, that time.
Oh, but that is hard-won knowledge. Oh. And I think that the key thing that you were saying there was about this kind of this being sustainable, and actually there's such potential for burnout, and especially if you are very smart, and you have this voracity for knowledge, you want to do everything. There is no end to learning, and there's no end to knowledge, and you can just kind of go on and on into that.
And I think there becomes this weird competitiveness, and this is why I left the London job. There becomes a competitiveness about how burnt out you are.
Right.
And like I say, I have panic attacks so that hopefully people who are in that situation can feel like this is a step in the journey. It's not the end of the journey, and you can manage this, and there's so many different ways to help you. But equally, some people will hear that because of the culture that we're in and think, well, I'm not that bad, so therefore I can't be burnt out. And burnt out looks so different for different people. And like for me now, burning out is, I just can't use my head right now. Like there's nothing in there. I'm just there. All thought is gone, and I definitely need to break. I wouldn't wish it getting really bad on anyone. And I think it's learning where for your body that burnout level is. And if that's like you just get super tired, or you stop enjoying the things that you normally enjoy, those are all different warning signs that I think are really important to attend to, and are all very equally valid.
Yes. And I think that absolutely that, in terms of recognizing your own signs, your own things, kind of, is it that you're losing your sense of humor? Is it that you can't get to sleep? What is it that's the signal for you to go, oh, hang on a minute, right, something going on here, I need to do something about it. But let's come back to then this half day off for Christmas Day, because this is like something out of a Dickens novel.
You know what I was doing, I think I don't know, and like it's not like anyone was putting this pressure on me. Like my family were really worried about me and really pushing for me to slow down, but I think I had in my head, because school had taught me, because the way that we set up exams is like I could do really well in coursework and then absolutely flunk an exam. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to work at 100% every day, otherwise I'm going to fail in the final exams. And that just wasn't true. And it isn't true for school either. I think there's lots of techniques I could have probably learned that are coming out now. Obviously, that kind of our understanding of neurodiversity gets better all the time. But yeah, it's Dickensian, it's completely insane. It shows how little I understood how the brain works. Like when we talk about sustainability, I had no concept that was how this worked, because it felt like it had paid off for me. It hadn't, but it felt like it had, and that the time had run out. But actually, I probably could have done better, or at least enjoyed the process of A-levels more, had I not been putting that kind of level of stress on myself.
Yeah. And I think, again, something you said there is really important, in terms of, you said nobody was making you do this. And actually, that's the thing that's the most pernicious, isn't it? Is that that this pressure people could be putting on themselves. And that's the thing that's the hardest to address, because if someone else was doing it, it would be easier to see where it's coming from, recognize it and call it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you do, when you're a PhD student, surround yourself by people who are under a lot of stress. So I think that's not so much an influence, but it can be, you can engage with people who are similarly stressed and therefore kind of justify to yourself that level of stress. And I think there's a real culture, like, some of the tips that I'll give are from productivity sort of podcasts and YouTubers, but there's a really nefarious part of that culture, which is that you have to be productive every minute of the day. And that productivity looks like having a YouTube channel and a PhD and 2 part-time jobs, and you can't do it all, and you shouldn't have to do it all.
No. Oh, here. Right. Well, let's get to these. Let's get to these tips then. So you said you've got 5 mistakes.
Yes.
And how not to make them. So tell us.
Okay, so mistake 1, and this is for taking a break over the Christmas holidays in particular. I've used that as like a case study, but I think it's true of taking breaks more generally.
I love it.
And I think mistake number 1 is doing it by yourself. If you worked in an office and you had a boss, you would message your boss saying, these are the dates I'm taking off, or Christmas would already be off anyway. You would then put an out of office on. So everybody in your community knows that you are not working right now, and therefore you have their support and buy-in, you'd hope, to preserve that time for yourself. We don't do that as PhD students. Like, I rarely ever see an out of office. And I think they're a really valuable tool, because even if someone does send you something super urgent, you have given them a filter whereby they can think, is this as urgent as it is? Do I need to email again? Or could I ask someone else? Or could I give them their week? And if they can't, then fine. But it's a massive filter for all the kind of superfluous nonsense that can feel very urgent and really isn't.
Very smart, like that. Very good. And
I think there's other people who are your allies as well. And I think that we talk about accountability partners, or they talk about it in productivity, but I think you can also have an accountability partner around taking a break. And mine is definitely my fiance, who will full on tell me off for working too much. And that can be a really valuable person to have. And that might be someone you meet in a PhD, like a session like this. Like, I'm happy to be someone's accountability partner and be like, are you relaxing today? What fun thing have you done?
Brilliant.
And I think just having people that are kind of on your side, and even if those are people that equally struggle with it like you do, kind of being like, okay, let's work together to make sure we have a really fun Christmas that isn't just work. And there's a thing I just learned about, and I'm sure I'm really late to the party, called body doubling, which they specifically recommend for people with ADHD, but is more broadly useful. And that's when you just work in the space of someone else. And you could have like a YouTube video playing. So I didn't realize I do apply this to relaxing. So I make costumes, I cosplay. So
amazing.
I really enjoy it. And it's creative, and I never have a plan or a pattern, and I just make something. But sometimes I won't do it. I won't prioritize it. So I will organize with another friend who does it. Like, ring me at 1, and then from 1 to 4, we're just going to sew and have a cup of tea. And whether that's online or in person, I found that a really great way to kind of, I know it sounds mad, but hold me.
No, it sounds gorgeous
for myself.
It sounds gorgeous. So we got number 1.
Yes. So number 2 is, this is something I realize I do as I was planning for this podcast, and it's really funny. So I often get headaches when I start to relax. And I don't think that's uncommon. Like, lots of people talk about getting ill when they start their holiday.
Absolutely.
And my theory, based on a sample size of myself, but I think it stands, is that when you start relaxing, I'll just abandon my routine entirely and be like, now I must be relaxed. Right. And actually, my routine is what relaxes me during my normal working day. Like, knowing that I get up, read something, have a smoothie. Those are all parts of my making the day manageable and comfortable. Yes. And so something I'm going to start to employ is just changing my routine so that it's more fun during the holiday. So that reading I do in the morning can be teen fiction, the next like Libra Dago book. It doesn't need to be an academic book. And the 20 minutes of yoga can be an hour and a half of a yoga session. It doesn't, because it's not restricted anymore.
Oh, but I love that.
Yeah, because I do think we suddenly just like throw everything out and think that will be relaxing, which I'm sure for some people it is, but for me, that lack of control is fully anxiety provoking.
Yeah. And also you go then into a sort of slump mode, and then it's there's a very different energy to that. Oh, I love it. And then, like you say, then you can treat yourself. Yeah, you just, because I'm quite routine oriented anyway. And I get lots of people aren't, but it really helps me. And I think it can be useful for PhD students just to have a routine in like the morning and the evening. Yes,
kind of
absolutely.
Get ready and switch off. And there's loads of elements within that routine where, instead of doing a task, you go out with a friend. Like, there's lots of ways to just maintain that sort of semi-schedule. And then I think as the holiday progresses, you can get further and further away from that. But I think working all day Friday and then waking up Monday and not doing anything you're used to doing, it's not surprising that you're
it's like into shock, isn't it? It's like you go into shock.
Yeah, I mean, humans are good at habits, right? So I think that complete, and also the pressure we put on ourselves. And that's the next point I wanted to say is, like, relax does not mean the same thing for everyone. Like we talked about burnout being unique. Relaxing is unique. My partner will just sleep all day. That is like him at his peak, relax. I would like to go to a museum or call a friend or make a costume, or I want to be doing something. Even like tidying relaxes me, which is
blimey.
Bad. But I like I know.
You are so welcome at my house.
Is that I need some help. But yeah, I really like organizing things. My friend loves gardening. I can't think of anything worse than gardening, but she loves, that's her relaxed thing. And other people, they want to sit and read all day. I can't do that. I get tired. So I think when we actually think about like, what do our friends do when they're on holiday, we realize they're very different from us.
Right.
And yet when we decide we're going to relax for a Christmas break, we're like, well, I must feel this very particular feeling, and I must feel it exactly now.
Oh, I think that's brilliant. Yes. So thinking about what you want to do ahead of time and having it there and knowing how you're going to enjoy yourself. Love that. Love that.
Absolutely. And just being kind to yourself with the process. Like, you're not going to go from work stress to being relaxed immediately. And I think, and I'm bad at this. And when I don't feel relaxed immediately, I think, oh, well, I might as well be working. And it's like, no, you need to give yourself more time if you're someone who struggles to switch off.
Yes.
Because that means it's just going to take you longer to rejuvenate, and then you'll come back stronger. But that's why I think taking 2 weeks at Christmas is a really valuable thing. And I do that now. I go full Christmas manic. Like, I just start decorating and watching Christmas movies like end of November.
Oh, me too. I have to confess that I've nearly done all my Christmas shopping, and it's only just November.
Whoa,
I love it.
I love it.
I'm obsessed. What can I tell you?
That's brilliant.
Now then, did we have 2 and 3 together there?
We did. We've got 2 more, right. I think.
Two more.
Okay, so number 4 was seeing this time as unproductive. I think a lot of PhD students, if not probably all of us, see that break as time off. And it's not, partly because your brain needs time to recover. It reduces the chance and the speed with which you'll burn out.
Yes.
But also, it's a really great time to invest in yourself a bit and like learn what exercise routines work for you, and then you can start implementing them into your day when you come back. Learn if is journaling for you, does it drive you mad? Don't know. Have a go. Is meditation absolutely gonna fix things for you, or do you hate being left with your own thoughts? Like, these are all great things to kind of experiment with and discover when you've got space and time. And referring to like a previous podcast episode that you had about relationships, it's a really important time to work on your relationship with people as well. Like, I think, make space and time for the people you care about. And equally, I think it's valuable to say at Christmas, protect your mental health from people who aren't a positive influence at that time. Because I think we all have this image of, and I'm very lucky that I have a really supportive family who I get on with very well. And we will have that kind of image for Christmas. But for a lot of people, Christmas is a really hard time, and being at home can be quite challenging. So I think also giving yourself kind of protection from that as much as you can, and time away from that as much as you can, is all really productive, and is all about resetting yourself in a very real way for coming back to work, but also just learning more about yourself long term. Like, it's productive longer term than just fixing your work habits.
And thank you so much for saying that, because Christmas is so tough for some people, and which is why, as you say, to remind people to be careful around that and to think about how they're going to look after themselves in that, and that you deserve the treats and the nice time, and how you're going to give that to yourself.
Absolutely. And I think if Christmas is a difficult time, if you've lost someone around that period or anything like that, I think it is extra important to take time for yourself, and to really reset and kind of think about that in whatever way looks best for you. But and there's wonderful things happening at Christmas that you can kind of grab hold of and enjoy, I think, around those challenges.
Brilliant. And the final tip.
Yes, so this is that everything has to be finished before I clock off for Christmas.
Oh yes.
I did this even at work, which is mad, because we were given the week off. It doesn't. I think telling your supervisors, we talked about like recruiting allies. I think if you're concerned about taking the break, telling your supervisors a month or so in advance, I'm going to take 2 and a bit weeks off for Christmas. Is there anything you need from me ahead of that time? Is one way to kind of think about it if you're very concerned about it. But also something I can't even remember where I got this from, so I apologize for whoever I'm stealing it from. But returning to a half-finished task is much easier than returning to a completed task.
Yes.
And I do this now every day. I've half finished my reading notes, which is not a difficult thing to do because I hate taking reading notes, but I finish them, which means in the morning I've got like a 10-minute task, which is finishing them up. And that's way less intimidating than starting a whole new project. And there's
absolutely.
Yeah. And there's a YouTuber called, I want to get her name right because she's really good, Michelle B. And she's a sort of productivity YouTuber, but more of a lifestyle. And I just really, really like her. And she always talks about how you have to create momentum. Like once you've created an action, so once you've finished something, that you're far more likely to roll into the next task with kind of excitement and momentum than you are waking up in the morning and thinking, and particularly waking up in the morning 2.5 weeks after you finished and going, oh my God, what is the next step? Like, what do I do next? As opposed to, I was halfway through this article. Let's finish that. And then let's see where the next steps take
me. I always say to people, always finish on a kind of cliffhanger. Finish halfway in, because then, as you say, then it draws you back in, because actually having to, like you say, rev the engine again to get yourself going makes absolute sense. To as I say, I always finish halfway through something so that I come back to it. Absolutely. I love that. Absolutely. And it takes the pressure off.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you're someone who's not got a great memory, my dyslexia definitely affects my memory. I have started free writing. I don't necessarily use them, but they're there if I need to use them. Kind of, if I'm going to take a break, I just free write. This is what I was doing today. This is what I'm hoping to do.
Yes.
I think a half-finished project is the most effective way to do that.
Yes.
But I think if you're concerned with, if I leave this reading for 2.5 weeks without having done the notes, there's just no way I'll remember it. I think if you just write everything you can think of in a very scrappy, typed, handwritten, you meant to handwrite free writing notes. I've never done that. I always type it, but that can be a nice thing to return to as okay, this is where my head was at on this.
Yes. Well, let's say I talk about it like handover notes. If you are handing over, like if you're a clinician and you hand over, this is how the patient is. So you can kind of write yourself some handover notes.
Absolutely. But the scrappiest, most, here's a picture that inspires me. Think of giving exactly like a handover note, really, like giving the next person a gentle piece of momentum, a piece of excitement of like, you're not writing a handover note because you've left the company in disrepute and you hate the person taking over. You're writing a handover note to excite and inspire you in 2 weeks' time, once you've got more energy and you're more settled and you know a bit more about yourself. Even if you've literally slept for 2.5 weeks, like whatever it is that resets you.
Oh, brilliant. I can't wait for the holidays now.
Hopefully these help.
This is fabulous. And I think we were saying before we started that this is hard-won advice. And that's why I love, and I'm so grateful when people come onto the podcast, because this is not come easy. This is hard-won, and you have made those mistakes and now can share with other people how to avoid it and how to look after yourself. It's brilliant.
Absolutely. And I think and I won't do them. There will be one of the 5 on the list, hopefully just one, where I'll just completely forget to do this before Christmas. So there's another thing about people, really feel free to reach out to me, because I could use with being held accountable to this as well. And just be kind with yourself, that you're not going to go from being someone who kind of overworks and worries to being someone who immediately switches off. That's but that can happen. My mental health is better than it has ever been. PhD is a favorite job I've ever done, and I think that I am so much more attentive to myself and able to look after myself while doing this than I've been in kind of office-based jobs. They don't suit me, and I found it a very neurodivergent friendly.
Right.
But through a lot of these kind of structures and putting these things in place. So I think we can be very negative about the challenges that PhD researchers face. And I think that's important to have an honest conversation about that. But I would also like to add that I think it's more than possible to actually have really cultivate practices that will give you good mental health while while working within the PhD. And I want to add to that as well, like counseling, meds. Like, I'm not suggesting that this alone is what's helped me through this journey. There's been a huge amount of mental health support at a sort of clinical level as well. And I think all of those things coming together is a really important part of that.
Oh, this is music to my ears. The best job you've ever done. Love that. I love it.
Absolutely. I get to read for a living. How fun is that?
It is brilliant. It is brilliant. So before I let you go, I'm just going to ask you for a top tip, which could be a reiteration of what's already come. But what would be your top tip going into the Christmas holidays?
Can I have two?
Of course you can.
Can I overwork on my top tip?
Of course you can.
I think top tip 1 is make relaxing your own. And I think that's a takeaway for everyone.
Love that.
And then my second top tip is, if you're neurodivergent and someone criticizes you for it, that's them. That's a them problem. That's got nothing to do with you. And you should just feel sorry for them and move on. So that's my dual top tips.
That's a brilliant place to finish. That's it. That's all we need to say there. Millie, thank you so much. I wish you an awesome festive season when we get there.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you so much for your time. And thank you all for listening.